Hello and welcome to the Astrobiology edition of my site. I'm going to show this tomorrow to my pre-APs, and hopefully the sub will show this to my advanced earth science on Thursday. But I'm also going to be showing a TED video, which I've got linked down here a little later. But astrobiology, or actually talking about outside the Earth life. Astrobiology is the study of life in the known universe. We only know of one universe. If we find we have a multiverse, we'll have to look there as well. But it investigates the origin of life, the evolution of life, distribution of life, and the future of life on Earth, as well as looking for life on the outside. The Earth is in what's called the habitable zone. Think about the Goldilocks story. There was too big, too small, just right, too hard, too soft, just right, too hot, too cold, just right. We actually live in the solar system in this habitable zone, the Goldilocks zone, where everything seems to be perfect, as well as, or at least for the life as we know it. The habitable zone does include the planet closer to us, Venus, which is not a real habitable place because of other problems. Greenhouse gone mad, acidic atmosphere, incredibly high surface pressures, and going out one planet farther for Mars. And with a little bit of tweaking, we could probably terraform Mars into something that would be Earth-like and would actually hold life as we know it. But astrobiology is set up to answer three questions. How does life begin, and how does it evolve? Is there life beyond the Earth, and if so, how do we detect it? Now, you guys have heard about extremophiles. My kids have actually done an assignment on that, and they should actually understand there are some things that don't really work the way we understand life. So we have to assume that some of the planets could have life, and we just don't expect to find it doing what we expect it to find, and that does not mean that the life isn't there. And then, what's the future for life on Earth? And maybe how about life in the universe? There's a good site out there. It's Astrobiology. Basically, it's a NASA.gov site, but it's got ARC in there too. But if you go to this site, you can learn much more about it. Okay, I like this picture. It actually goes from 13.6 to 14.2 billion years ago in the Big Bang, and the formation of small particles of matter. Then we actually start getting cooling of gases, coming together to make galaxies, coming together to make solar system. This is part of the Eagle galaxy, or the Pillars, part of the Pillars, which is part of the Eagle Nebula, sorry. It's in the Milky Way galaxy, and it actually does have formation of stars going on at the apex of these, what are called pillars. A lot of people call this thing the hand of God as well. But we have exploding stars, creation of heavier elements. We have elements, biotic elements, that are actually in asteroids. This is the formation of our solar system, sun in the middle, and the planets actually pulling in the rest of the nebulous material, and eventually cleaning out orbits and having the solar system that we know today. We have the formation of planets, we have larger molecules, and then we end up with the DNA molecule, which is the basic idea of what life is, how we understand it. If you guys ever heard of Gary Larson and the Far Side, this is a really cool picture of what looks like aliens flying through a big town and just going yeehaw! Probably not the best way of saying it, but you have the people freaking out down below, and that's probably exactly what we would do if we ever have somebody come down and visit us. Or if we actually get to the point where we can do some visiting, maybe they'll do that when we're flying through. We're going to get into geologic time and evolution, and this picture actually shows a one calendar year starting at January and going up to December. This is starting with 4.6 billion years ago and going up to today, so the beginning toward the end of the year, and this is the beginning of the Earth 4.6 billion years ago. 4.6 billion years ago, and moving up in that direction. So if we started down here, this would be January 1st. Got to make sure I get a pen. This would be January 1st. And as we go up, the dates get change. This is 4 billion years ago, 3 billion, 2 billion, 1 billion, and no billions. This is today. And you can see that would be like December 31st. It actually has some signification on the outside. We basically had a molten planet at this point, way too hot for life as we know it. In fact, way too hot to actually have liquid water. We had water actually escaping out of the formation Earth, comets, asteroids slamming into the planet, bringing water. The water eventually worked its way up to the surface. It condensed, moved up and condensed into clouds, and the clouds actually rained, and the rain never made it down to this molten Earth. But every raindrop that got down there, every raindrop that got close, cooled off this surface. Eventually we started having rock formation, and the rocks just got bigger and bigger and bigger as the Earth cooled, and then eventually we had raindrops that fell down. Raindrops fell on the high areas and they sank down. They started filling in the lower areas, and that's basically how we got our oceans. About 3.8 billion years ago, we started getting life in the oceans. They look like these. These are what are called stromatolites. And stromatolites actually we find in fossils, and they tend to be the world's oldest fossils, somewhere in the range of about 3.8 billion years ago. That kicks in right about here. So the ocean started forming someplace in this area just a few 100 million years after the Earth formed. Oceans started to form. Life formed around 3.8 billion years ago. Life got more and more complicated. This is all, this area right from here up is what's called the Precambrian. The reason it's called Precambrian is it comes before the Cambrian period. If you actually look at a larger view of this, here's the Cambrian. Precambrian moves down in this direction for a long way, all the way down to the bottom of the screen and beyond. It's called the Cambrian explosion because life just starts going crazy. Now, you would recognize some of the things that are in here, but they're basically invertebrates, jellyfish, things that don't have backbones, things that float in the water, probably don't have a lot of say in which direction they go, but they got more and more complicated as we go up. And this is the neat thing about the fossil record, is we don't find complicated life down here. It's very simple life, and as it goes through time, the life gets more and more complicated. And then we have the life moving on to land. We have the first forest. We have the coal forming area. The coal that we actually find in Pennsylvania and Mississippi and every place else formed in this period. But if you take a look, this is like, I don't know, 360 million years ago to 240 million years ago, and there's like 280 million years. So we're talking like a whole bunch of million years. About 80 million years forming the coal. Permian, we're actually in the age of the amphibians. We had the age of the fishes, and then right here we have a mass extinction. What happened? We're not exactly sure, but maybe an asteroid came flying in and smacked into the planet, moving at 24,000 miles an hour, moving in, smacked into the planet, and it killed like 90% of the species. And what happened is we saw a pretty good sized fossil record, and then right there lots of things disappeared, including the trilobites, those things that looked, I'm not sure how you'd actually explain it, but they had really cool all kinds of appendages. The neat thing about trilobites is they lived almost everywhere on the planet. They did live in oceans, but almost anywhere on the planet. They didn't live for very long. They lived from about right there to about right there. So if we find a trilobite, we know that the age of that rock is somewhere between 240 million years to 260 million years. It's called an index fossil, and there are a few that are like that. We'd like everybody to do that, but some things, if like we talk about dragonflies live from there all the way up. So if you find a dragonfly fossil, it could be, maybe 350 million years old, but it could also be 100 million years, or it could be 50 million years, or 150 million years. So index fossils, large areas of the planet, but very short lifespans, from formation to the end. Then we have the age of the dinosaurs. We actually have mammals forming real early in here, but they were very small, probably very timid, because this is the age of the dinosaurs. If they came out at the wrong time, they probably were eaten. And then we have a mass extinction where we lose about 60% of the species. Most of them being reptilian. Mammals make it, and mammals get really huge. Sloths, elephants, camels, 2-3 times the size of the things that we have today. So it looked like they actually got really big, and then that was selected against. So now we actually have the animals we have. And then right here at the very top, right around December 31st, probably in the last hour of that day, we have the formation of humans, Homo sapiens, and we're still in this time period right here, and the question is how much farther will we get? But you can see life, you can see some of those general forms of life happening in here. You can see the ages, you can see the actual age of these ages or eras, and then you can actually see the whole entire from the formation of the Earth to the end, to where we are today. Okay, thinking about the Earth, we pick up about 100 tons of meteoritic dust per day, in the form of meteor dust, in form of meteors, and in form of anything that they bring in, water vapor, but we pick up 100 tons per day. So if you think about the end of a week, the end of a month, or the year, the Earth is still picking up a lot of material. We look out into the Milky Way galaxy and we see these huge gas clouds that are out here. And if we use spectroscopy, which my earth science kids just figured out, we can actually see that there's water vapor out there. There's carbon dioxide, there's methane, and maybe even sugar in these nebula. So there are organic material that's out there. This organic material probably was not created by a biotic system like it does on this planet, but it's coming through an abiotic form. But it looks like we can actually get the material that is used for life out there. This is a SETI site. And SETI stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. We actually have radio telescopes that are looking out into space, looking for frequencies, like radio stations, TV stations, looking for somebody who's sending out something that actually makes sense to us. The question is would we understand? If we don't listen to the right frequency, would we miss it? So we are trying to find life elsewhere. I'm not sure what we'll do when we finally discover it, but I'm pretty sure of the fact that amongst these 200 billion stars out here, there's got to be planets, and some of those planets actually live in that Goldilocks zone, and some of those actually have life, and some of those have actually reached the same technology that we have, and some of those are actually sending out I Love Lucy TV shows and shadow radio stations. All we have to do is figure out what frequency, and we can get it. Okay, here's that fossilized stromatolites, and it's just layer upon layer of blue-green algae. They're actually pretty decent in living in areas that maybe not be too conducive to life. They like basically shallow seas. These are stromatolites that are growing today, probably off the coast of Australia, and these are stromatolites that lived a long time ago. Blue-green algae, and what they did produce is they did produce oxygen. They did produce sugars. They don't produce it as well as green algae, but they do produce it, and they help put oxygen in the atmosphere, and that allowed life to actually come out of the oceans and move on to land, and that allowed forests to form and the critters that climbed out of the ocean to eat the plants. The first life that came out of the ocean was not an animal, it probably was a plant, and then very soon after that we probably had animals coming out, feeding on that and actually getting away from the oceans, which they had predators. First ones out on land didn't have to worry about being eaten by things. The second one that came out maybe did, because that first one was looking for them. Okay, so we have an experimentation. The experiment was, can organic compounds be generated under conditions similar to those that existed on the primeval Earth? In other words, can we take an abiotic, a system that does not have life, and can we create organic compounds? Well, a professor by the name of Stanley Miller back in the 1950s tried to do this. And what he did is he had this closed glass system. He put water in it, and he heated up the water, which sent water vapor up into here. He actually put gases in here, like ammonia, methane, water, hydrogen, probably put in some other things too. He put an electrode in there, and he actually sent basically like lightning, which would have happened in those clouds that formed up here for the rain. So he had the atmosphere, and how do we know the atmosphere was like this? Well, we can actually see trapped bubbles in ice, glaciers, really old ice, and we can find it in some rocks. There's a vesicular basalt, vesicular rhyolite, which actually vesicular means there are vessels in it, and what happens is it actually traps the gases before the rock can actually let them escape. The rock solidifies and traps them. So we can look at those things, and we can actually find out that these were the gases that were around, probably the ones that were being belched out of the earth, forming our first primordial atmosphere. And he did this for a few days. He had a cooling system where water actually came in, cooled off this gas, and this is the way we make clouds. He got droplets of liquid that with gravity fell down to the bottom. He had this little U shape so they could collect. If it got too much, it spilled into here, got evaporated, got re-electrified, and he let this run for 2 or 3 days, and he started noticing this water was getting cloudy. He ran it a little longer, and it actually started turning into a very dark brown, almost like a tar shape, a tar color. And when he finally let some out and he analyzed it, he found organic molecules, abiotic systems forming organic molecules, things like amino acids, things like urea, things like lactic acid, the thing that makes your muscles hurt, acetic acid, which is vitamin C, formic acid, which ants make to actually move from point A to point B. But these are all organic molecules that were actually created by this whole system, and they collected down here, forming this, like I said, this cloudy mixture. So what happens? How do we do this? Well, it's a very easy stretch from making this stuff, because if we let this stuff form, it'll form nucleic acid, where we actually get a phosphate, we get a sugar, and we get a nucleic acid, making what's called a nucleotide. And then if we get enough of these guys will actually form a framework. We call this framework RNA. And RNA actually is a framework of individual nucleotides. We could call this one adenine. This one could be thymine if this was RNA, but it's uracil. We have cytosine and we have guanine. We don't have them in any particular order. We could have lots of them, and I don't think they drew these things as any different, but this nucleic acid would be different for all of these. So we could actually just set up a system that looked sort of like this. And then the next step is, once we have this, can we get the complementary pairing? Can we get the U's to line up? So if this is an A, can we get a U to line up? Can we get the C's and the G's and the C's to line up and actually make a copy of itself? And then the next step from there is, once we get the copy, can we get the copy to split and do what's called self-replication? This is the first step to life. We got to be able to self-replicate. Excuse me, one more time. The first cell is thought to have arisen by actually taking these things and wrapping them with wrapping paper. This wrapping paper was a double-layered phospholipid membrane, where, again, for biology, where we had this area that loves water and we had this area that hates water, and we have another area that loves water. So we have a hydrophilic, loving, and a hydrophobic area. So it can actually separate extracellular from intercellular area. And then inside there, we put this self-replicating RNA. This still is not life, but again, it's another step. Somehow we get the RNA and the DNA to make to separate and make RNA chains, the RNA chains to move to ribosomes so that we can actually put nucleic acids, which makes proteins, and that would be the way life is. We got single-celled organisms to actually go together and start making multicellular organisms. Pretty easy stretch. And then we had the circular DNA of a prokaryote, which these guys would all be, to be self-replicating and to actually make RNA and proteins. Remember, prokaryotic cells have a round circular DNA, and eukaryotic cells in the nucleus have DNA that comes in strands. But both of them actually code for RNA. Both of them code for proteins. The primary job of DNA. Then we had what's called symbiotic theory, where we had this eukaryotic cell, or this larger cell, actually getting so large that it was tough to actually bring material through the cell membrane to actually feed everything, as well as getting everything from the outside or from the inside waste materials back out. So what we think maybe happened is we had this bacterial prokaryotic cell that actually loved to breathe. And breathing in oxygen actually allows it to make ATP, which is the energy source for cells. And then we had this other one. They all have a membrane on the outside. Then we had this other one that was photosynthetic. It could take light and actually make sugar. So we have things that actually could produce energy, ATP, and we have things that actually make sugar, which is food. And they were very good at it. And then the cell, the larger cell, which had openings for endoplasmic reticula, had openings, and they actually took in larger area, and it had its own cell membrane. It actually picked up part of the cell membrane of the eukaryotic cell, and now actually has a double membrane, something that actually sort of reinforces the idea that mitochondria, having their own little cell membrane, actually used to be outside. But we have these things that make ATP, energy, and then we also had this endosymbiotic pull-in of the phytosynthetic thing, which is actually going to make food. So we have mitochondria and we have chloroplasts inside of cells. Animal cells, more roundish, have mitochondria for the ATP. Plant cells, more angular, actually have the mitochondria for the ATP, but they also have the chloroplast for the photosynthesis. And again, that's called endosymbiotic relationships. Here's another picture of the sort of the same thing. Step one, large bacteria minding its own business, probably not doing as well as if it can actually get the help of these smaller prokaryotes. The smaller prokaryotes actually think they're being ingested, and actually for whatever reason they don't get ingested. They start realizing that, hey, this guy's going to give me food. Let me pick a darker color. This guy's going to give me food. They're going to give me oxygen. They're going to take away my waste products. They're going to do all kinds of things for me, and all I have to do is what I'm good at. I can make ATP. Well, I can actually bring in sunlight and make sugar. So we can make food for the cell. The waste product of this cell is sugar. This cell now is going to be happy. So we have happy internal prokaryotes. We have the happy external eukaryotic cell, and we have the cells that make up 60 trillion of you, which makes you. Then I'm going to show this TED video. If you go to TED.com and you type in protocell, you can see this. And there's another site that actually has really good pictures, especially for, if I zoom way back up here, especially for this formation, getting from this Big Bang 14.6 billion years later to actually make the solar system as we know it, and then somewhere around there, way back there, to actually make DNA, which again is the basic backbone for understanding life. Okay, that's it. I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you much. Bye.